US backs Canada in condemning detention of 2 Canadians in wake of Huawei arrest. And Australia recognises West Jerusalem as Israel's capital. Meanwhile, Carrie Lam refused to explain the government's decision to drop corruption and misconduct in public office charges against her predecessor. She says the Department of Justice would be willing to respond to questions about the decision. Leung Chun-ying was accused of entering an agreement with UGL Limited worth around $50 million. He did not declare part of the sum received after he took office. Both the city's anti-graft body and the Justice Department concluded insufficient evidence as the reason not to initiate charges against him. High-stakes talks were held in Washington between top Canadian and American diplomats. The meeting was centered around China and the detainment of a pair of Canadians in Beijing. Their arrests might be part of a bigger political game involving the arrest of a Chinese tech executive in Vancouver. Peter Coveos has details.
Well, I can say this. The unlawful detention of 2 Canadian citizens is unacceptable. They ought to be returned. The United States has stood for that, whether they're our citizens or citizens of other countries. We ask all nations of the world to treat other citizens properly, and the detention of these 2 Canadian citizens in China ought to end.
Mike Pompeo's words were the strongest condemnation of China's detainment of Michael Spavor and Michael Kovrig. The Canadians were detained this week in a move widely seen as retaliation for the arrest of a Chinese executive on the behalf of the U.S. Prosecutors accuse Meng Wanzhou of misleading multinational banks about Iran-linked transactions, which would have violated U.S. sanctions. Meng is the CFO of tech giant Huawei. She was released on $10 million Canadian bail, but has always maintained her innocence. American and Canadian officials stopped short of saying her situation is linked to the arrest of the Canadians.
I have spoken this week with the Chinese ambassador to Canada, and we've had many contacts with Chinese authorities. Chinese officials in their contact with Canada have not drawn a connection between these different issues. From Canada's perspective, these kinds of issues ought never to be confused with one another.
But timing is everything. China and the U.S. are locked in heated talks over a trade war. U.S. President Donald Trump complicated matters, suggesting Meng could be a bargaining chip in the dispute, politicizing the arrest and her possible extradition.
We have a set of trade discussions that are ongoing with the Chinese. As the Chinese have said, we're working on that, while all the other issues, not just this particular issue, we have lots of complicated issues going on with China today all around the world.
Back in Beijing, Canadian officials were granted access to one of the 2 detainees and are still trying to contact the second. Peter Coveos, TVB News.
Australia's Prime Minister says his country now formally recognizes West Jerusalem as Israel's capital.
Australia now recognises West Jerusalem being the seat of the Knesset and many of the institutions of government is the capital of Israel. West Jerusalem is the capital of Israel. And we look forward to moving our embassy to West Jerusalem when practical, in support of and after final status determination.
Morrison also confirmed Australia's support for a 2-state solution with a Palestinian capital in East Jerusalem. The status of Jerusalem is one of the biggest obstacles to a peace deal between Israel and Palestinians who want East Jerusalem recognized as the capital of a Palestinian state.
British Prime Minister Theresa May is scrambling to rescue her Brexit deal with sceptical British lawmakers after her request to sweeten the agreement was rebuked by the European Union. Still, she put a positive spin on her talks Thursday at the EU summit.
The EU made clear that it is their firm determination to work speedily on a future relationship or alternative arrangements which ensure no hard border by the 31st of December 2020, so that the backstop will not need to be triggered. If the backstop was ever triggered, it would apply only temporarily.
We have to treat it as a good sign. I mean, that we are ready to reconfirm our assurances and our goodwill and good faith when it comes to so-called backstop. I have no mandate to organize any further negotiations.
May came to the EU summit hoping for legally binding changes to the agreement that's getting strong opposition from a majority of British lawmakers. But the 27 other EU leaders offered only reassurances. The Times newspaper in England wrote that most of May's senior ministers think the Brexit plan is dead. They're now discussing different options, including having a second referendum.
3 people are under arrest after at least 11 people died of suspected food poisoning following a ceremony to celebrate the construction of a new Hindu temple in southern India. More than 130 people have been hospitalized. 8 are in critical condition. Authorities said the Hindu devotees ate contaminated cooked vegetables and rice. They almost immediately started vomiting and complained of severe stomach pains. 3 members of the temple's management have been arrested, and samples of the food have been sent for chemical analysis.
And still to come tonight. Authorities shut down local chemist suspected of selling counterfeit medicine. Former Trump lawyer Michael Cohen claims he was instructed to pay hush money. And banknotes thrown from buildings sparks money madness in Shenzhen.
呢種滋味令人回味。呢個經典組合 Big Mac 套餐配脆薯王只係28蚊，仲有 Double Big Mac。
Welcome back to TVB News. If you recently purchased medicine from a chemist in Sheung-shui, you might want to recheck the goods. Customs officers arrested 2 men from a dispensary that allegedly stocked more than 50,000 counterfeit pills. If you think this drug can help treat bad knee joints, you could be disappointed. 4 other brands were also counterfeited. Hong Kong Customs confirmed that after speaking to the brand owners, who noticed attempts to pass the knockoffs as the real deal. For example, the genuine stock has a pagoda on its packaging, the fake one a tower. What's supposed to be a box of 30 pills became a box of 36. Officers raided a dispensary in Sheung-shui and 2 of its warehouses after receiving complaints, some from mainland China.
They target non-Hong Kong residents. We have sent some undercover who pose to be Hong Kong people, and they and the shop offers genuine goods to the customers. When we pose ourselves as tourists from the mainland, we managed to purchase some counterfeit goods. So we are quite sure that this is not an incidental, but instead it's the practice of that shop.
He's tracing the supplier of the fake goods following the arrest of 2 salesmen at the shop that was offering a 40% discount on the normal retail price. During the raid on Thursday, officers confiscated roughly 51,000 pills and 22 litres of suspected counterfeit medicines. Also, 68,000 pills of suspected controlled medicines like painkillers and heart disease drugs. Part of what's seized is being tested at government labs to see if they contain harmful substances.
Days after the Ombudsman criticized local authorities for failing to adequately supervise elderly home services, the Elderly Commission is now weighing in on the issue. Pinky Wong has more.
Latest government statistics show more than 24,600 senior citizens live in non-subsidized elderly homes. Earlier this week, the Social Welfare Department was slammed by the Ombudsman for its lax monitoring of the industry. Criticism continued today.
Unhealthy ecosystem for this kind of a licensed home is that over 80% of those residents live there are sponsored by our CCSA, which means it's roughly around $8,000 a month. It is basically inadequate to rent the premises, to hire the staff, to provide 24 hours service for the residents.
His goal, to raise the bar for quality services.
The government has a very clear policy objective is to upgrade all these licensed homes to at least to A1 standard, which has a bigger room, more manpower, and the basic cost is around $13,000, which is much higher than $8,000.
Lam also suggests elderly homes refer to the hospital accreditation scheme that includes self-assessments and external peer reviews to evaluate performance. Those in the industry remain skeptical. Grace Lee of the Elderly Services Association thinks the root problem lies in an unreasonable expectation to provide 24-hour care at low cost. Is there anything people can do at the community level? The Elderly Commission thinks service quality groups consisting district councillors and volunteers could help monitor nursing home services. Pinky Wong, TVB News.
Hong Kong's oldest and largest outdoors retail expo officially opened its doors today. Haley Joe checked out the Brands and Products Expo at Victoria Park.
For lots of young people who mostly shop online, it can be a perfect chance to experience physical retail. The annual Hong Kong Brands and Products Expo kicked off this morning in Causeway Bay. The officiating guest, Chief Executive Carrie Lam, toured the expo and spent about $2,600 on food. She also invited citizens to come and support local products. The expo has a long history stretching back to 1938.
This pavilion has been set up to showcase products from a long time ago, such as a hairdryer and a telephone. There's also a machine to transport you back in time.
Of course, shoppers are always on the lookout for good bargains.
Maybe a little bit cheaper. I want to spend time to do some shopping before Christmas.
I come every year and think that the price is relatively lower than the market.
Despite Sino-US trade tensions, optimism prevailed among vendors.
You can see many people here, so crowded. Every year we must come here and let them know that we have new products, almost 1 million.
We expect 10% more than last year. I see happy faces of people here and the desire to come here. Senior people can come for free and look for a good bargain and an attractive price.
There are about 880 stalls selling food, home appliances, fashion and beauty products. The expo runs until January 7th. Haley Joe, TVB News.
Staying in the US, a federal court in Texas has ruled the Affordable Care Act invalid. The ruling comes on the eve of the sign-up deadline for next year. Judge Reed O'Connor ruled a recent bill that eliminated the penalty for not having coverage removed the constitutional foundation from Obamacare. The justice stated the rest of the law cannot be separated from the provision. The decision will likely be appealed, and the Trump White House says it will remain in place for now. Opponents to Obamacare challenged fundamental provisions of the law twice before and lost both times. About 20 million people have gained health insurance coverage since the law passed in 2010. And finally tonight, chaos in Sham Shui Po today after someone threw money from a building onto the streets below, sparking a rush of people trying to pick them up. Footage provided by pedestrians at Fo Kwa Street showed multiple $100 banknotes flying from above. Many swarmed the site trying to catch one. Nearby residents also found ways to get a hand on those that got away. It's believed the stunt was done by a local internet entrepreneur who got rich from his Bitcoin business. Police were on site for investigation, with no arrests made so far. And thanks for